Welcome to my surfboard series. I thought it'd be fun to show you a different substrate for a change. And my man is a surfer, so he often has old boards. And instead of getting rid of them, I turn them into canvases. So if you're interested in doing a board, the way I prepare it is it's obviously cleaned first. And then I sand it, and I sand it as much as I can to get a bit of a gritty surface on it. And then I use primer, which could be a gesso or it could just be a primer white paint, as in a house paint. And I probably do a couple of layers of that. I also tape around the side, so it gets a very nice clean line when the tape comes off. And if you do have fins on it, I love the fins remaining on the board. I tape around the fins. So that's just a little bit of preparation. But surfboards have a whole different feel about them, particularly when you're an abstract artist. A lot of surfboard artists do very much consistent almost reflection art. So it's the same on both sides. So it looks very even. And as an abstract artist, that is obviously not something that I do. So these boards will never be surfed again. They're just things that I put up in my studio. I have done them before for friends. I don't sell them. That said, I don't promote myself as a surfboard artist. I would sell them if somebody wanted to commission me to do it, or if somebody wanted a board done. These particular ones mean a lot as old boards to my partner, so I put these up in my studio. That's just a little bit of prep for you on why I do boards. This particular one, I've decided in advance that I want to kind of tell a story of the beach and the feelings I get at the beach. It's one of my favorite places to be in the world. And I've been going to the beach since I was a very, very young, since I was a baby in New Zealand. So I do have memories, a lot of memories that when I'm painting intuitively, they come out. I don't actually necessarily bring them out in any way. I just feel that they come out when I have ideas in my head of beach and surf and being in the surf and being on the beach all day. It definitely shows in the work if I have that intention in mind. So as you can see, obviously the colors I've chosen in these early layers, and they're very early layers, are quite bright and beachy, almost childlike. I started with a bit of spray paint. I'm bringing a bit of the hot pink spray paint to my work. I also have a couple of other colors, but that's I love the loose lines that I can get with a little bit of spray. I don't like a lot of it, but a little bit of it I think can just add some different types of marks. Obviously, I'm bringing in some light blues, which for the beaches here in Australia and New Zealand, there's a lot of blue in the sky and in the water, and this is almost like a grey blue to just bring in some slightly more muddy or muted tones. I've got the greens, the bright pops of greens and yellow, and I'm not really thinking about holding or restricting my palette at all. I'm bringing in colors that evoke a memory, and I'm bringing in colors that I'm enjoying at this point. That will direct the painting in a way, but also not hold me to a particular palette. I'm using lots of different tools, lots of different marks in these early layers to give a lot of coverage of the entire board. But as I said, because it's a surfboard, it has a whole different host of challenges in that the board drops off at the sides. So that in itself gives you a different challenge in terms of how the paint will fall. If it's too watery, it will go right over the edges, and I often do that and have to find ways to bring back some opacity to my paint so that I can get some marks in paint that don't fall over the edge and off the sides. Also, orientation. When this goes on my wall, I actually have them as landscape paintings. So ultimately, I will be looking at a composition that for me works as you're seeing it. That said, I do in between paints, I do put it up against a wall vertically so I can see how it's working that way as well, because I believe paintings need to be looked at in all different orientations to see what's working and what doesn't. And when you do look at them in different directions, it gives you a whole different sense of balance. So I do take this and put it against the wall in between painting sessions. I also give myself quite a bit of time between the painting sessions. So it sits in my studio and I can look at it and feel into, is it evoking the emotion from me that I want it to? Do I like the way the colors are blending together? Do I feel like the story is being told across the painting? Obviously, like I said, it's surfboard art. I want it to speak of a certain story, not just to me, but also to my partner who surfs. I do want it to be something that he can relate to in some way. And I don't always do that on these boards, but in this particular one, it's a storytelling board for me. So I'm bringing in at this early stage, the light colors to balance some of the bright colors that I already have on there. This is a very pale green that goes so beautifully with the pale blue and also the greens that are already on there. So when I've got a little bit of color on my brush or on my palette, I do tend to try and bring a little bit of it right the way across the board. So there is consistency happening all the way across. This will change a little bit as I go, but right now consistency is important for me in these early layers on these boards so that I can get a sense of the story that I'm telling. And I'm also leaving, if you can see, a lot of the marks, I'm working around my marks. I'm not at this point going over them. There's a lot of wet paint and I'm wanting to retain a lot of the marks and colors of my early layers. So I'm waiting for areas to dry before I go over them so that the layers underneath don't blend too much. You'll also see me working between the darks and the lights. So I've worked on an early color. Now I contrast that with going to a deep brown and bringing in some gutsier marks. And I've changed my paintbrush. I'm now painting a little bit smaller. Before I was making some big marks. The swap between the big brushes and the small brushes can really help with creating different marks, but also creating story within the painting. So even in these first layers, I'm very much thinking story, but not holding it too deeply. Well, there's a bold mark I often make with a very, very, very fluoro pinky orange, and here in Australia, the pink tones, be them bright or light, they're everywhere for me. There is something about the light here that I translate, or it translates for me in these very bright fluoro colors. They bring this vibrancy and this brightness to landscape abstracted work that nothing else can. It speaks of the almost the harshness that you can get in the light here in Australia, and in some ways New Zealand. I think in terms of the browns and the deep browns against the bright colours give me the sense of New Zealand. And then when I do these pops of bright colour, it reflects for me the outdoors of Australia and the difference between the two lands for me, which they're both very much in my mind when I think of beach. I've spent the same amount of time in both countries on the beaches, and they're very, very different from each other. If you're lucky enough to ever have travelled, they're beautiful, and the beaches are different. New Zealand's very rugged in its coastline, particularly on the west coast. And Australia, the Sydney beaches where I've spent a lot of time, or the Perth beaches, and going up the coast to Byron or to the Gold Coast. There's just a real beach culture that's quite bright and light and very, very intense blues against the greens and the sands and the light colours. And as I said, perhaps it's my journeying through the centre of Australia that brings in the oranges and the pinks, although the sunsets can really have some spectacular colours in them. So you can see me now putting in some little marks with the little brushes in the blues, just telling more of a story of the sky and the sea. And it's abstract. So my mind is not present so much when I'm painting. I'm painting a feeling. It's between the layers that I bring in my critical brain, and I think about a little bit more about, is this, do I like the combination of colours? Do I like the way that the colours are feeling across the whole board? And this is a real push and pull for me. You will see across the series that I go back and forth quite a lot to try and get the right balance. I think my palette doesn't change too much over the entire painting of the series, but what does change is the story and the layers underneath and the complexity that it creates when you go layer upon layer on a surface, even on a surfboard. And I try things out. Does this work for me? Do I need to change up the balance of blue, the types of marks that I have in the blue? It's the same process as my big palettes, but in a way it challenges me in different ways. And I like the challenge that happens by working on different substrates in this way. This is a really big paintbrush that I use for that big stroke. And again, moving between the small brushes, the hard brushes, the soft brushes, all of that helps create different marks. And I do try and swap between them a lot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we're early at this stage, so it doesn't matter too much. So I hope you'll stick with me across this series and check out how this board goes. It's already online on my Instagram page if you want to see the final product and know where I'm heading with this. If you want to stay in the curiosity of where I go with this, then don't go and have a look. Just move through the series with me.